I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this because I've gotten to see a couple of the videos and stuff, and I've heard some really good things about it. So we're really excited to talk about Pericle Gathering Darkness. The average gamer who's dabbled in D&D and is interested in trying something new, what would be your short elevator pitch to try to hook that person and get them interested in this game?
Well, Chris, we've been running some ads on Facebook to get people, and so we know what people like the most. And I'll tell you, the one tagline that seems to get people to come check out our game more than any other is, if D&D and Gloomhaven had a baby, it would be Pericle. So we just thought, we were kind of, I think Jeremy suggested, and we thought, well, let's just try it. And we tried it, and people click on that one. So, and maybe that's because it kind of tells you, because it's not quite D&D, but it's more than Gloomhaven in terms of story and character creation and complexity. And it's kind of in between.
Yeah, it's not as simple as a really cool board game or even just a really cool RPG. It's complicated in a good way.
I've honestly not heard of a game that combines all of these things in one before. So it kind of blows my mind, to be honest. There's so many moving parts to this. What has been the roadmap from where it started to right now?
So I'm been playing Pericle for a long time. I come from a family and a group of friends that traditionally play D&D and Pathfinder, but we play a lot of other games. But since my kids were little, we've been also playing Pericle. It's our effort to play a role-playing game when we don't have as many people, when we don't have a game master. And over years, we've refined and developed the rules. I created a software program years ago that would just spit out random encounters that we would play, and that would be the game master. My son wasn't happy with that, so by the time he became an adult, he made one that allowed us to load stories into the software. And over the years, we've loaded dozens and dozens of them using a spreadsheet. And finally, we realized it was growing to friends and family that were playing, and we realized, hey, this is a pretty cool game. Actually, what happened is we started playing Gloomhaven. And we like Gloomhaven, so I'm not Gloomhaven, but we thought, our game is kind of halfway between Gloomhaven and halfway between D&D. It's got more story, more development, and we personally like it better, so we thought, let's publish it. But our goal a year ago was to just have it be a fun thing that was published. But once we started socializing it, on the internet, and there's a group of us that are trying to do this, we realized that a lot of people liked this concept and wanted to join, and that's how Jeremy joined us, and he'll talk about that in just a second. So we've switched gears this last year, taken on funding, become a formal company, and we're going to commercialize it and make it a really high quality professional offering.
I saw ads for Pericle, and I heard about Pericle, and I checked out the website. I thought it looked really, really cool. And I noticed that there was an online component or an app component. And my background is in music, and so the first thing that jumped in my head was, hey, this looks cool. But the second thing that jumped in my head was, I wonder if they need a composer for music for Pericle. And so I contacted them, and then we got in touch, and I originally joined the team as a composer. And just kind of grown more involved over time. And so now me and Steve are spearheading the Kickstarter.
I am very intrigued because I've never personally played one without a GM, but I love the idea of it. So in what way is this game going to work, I guess, seamlessly? How has it worked for you in the past without a GM at all? Because that's something like Chris DMs our D&D game on Party in Peril, one of our shows. And I would love for him to play with us, but I haven't seen like a great way of that happening. So I guess, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
The rules have to be streamlined in such a way that they are a little bit simpler than D&D or Pathfinder, so that you don't end up in very many situations where you need somebody to be a judge. Just like, for example, even determining whether you hit, you roll this die that gives you a hit indicator, as opposed to in D&D where you go, let's see, I have +7, then -2, did I hit? And somebody has to sort of tell you. So there's still a lot of the same mechanics with movement and blocking and strategy and attacking, but making it simple so you don't need a judge. So that's the rule component. In terms of the story component, that we have the software telling the story, and as you can imagine, you can have the software be very elaborate. We have gorgeous artwork. We have a team of artists from Germany that they're going to paint hundreds of pictures for us. We have a professional video studio from Dallas that's putting them together. So the videos combined with music and sound are going to really tell a nice story. And then after each video clip, the software will stop and it will prompt the players with questions that they'll answer like in a multiple choice. So it's kind of like a elaborate choose your own adventure. What we really want it to feel as sandboxy as possible. So what we do is when we have encounters that we're playing out, it takes effort to program them in the software. So we actually play the encounter with a game master at first, and we'll stop and say, what would be your choices here? You want to, the bad guys are in this building, what do you want to do? And we'll take a list of everything. Oh, I didn't think somebody wants to sneak around the back. Let's add that as a choice. And then we'll make sure to present options to the players that represent not the full universe, but the reasonable universe of choices. So that we're not just giving them two choices. We want them to feel like they really get choices that they'll make. Plus, we don't want it to be like a video game. Like there can be a scenario where the software will say, if you want to convince the merchant to give you a better deal, make your argument. And then if that's your choice, you'll make the selection. Then it will say, if you played on the merchant's concerns that he lost his daughter, because you knew that already, then this happens. If you did this, this happens. So that really, instead of being fed a bunch of choices that you choose, you have to, as a team, sit around and think about and go, no, I think we should talk about the taxes or the whatever. So it helps enhance role playing in that way. And then when you're in an encounter, the other thing that we really wanted to do is make the encounter setup really easy, because there's no game master there to draw the map out. So we have these maps that are highly detailed. These are made by a professional map guy. The Modern Lich is his name. His real name's Eric Henson, but he's professionally makes maps for D&D, and they're just really gorgeous. And we have some maps that are small, some that are big. This is one of the material expenses of the game. But our goal is, if you play Gloomhaven or something, there's a fair amount of setup work where you have to connect pieces and you have to put stuff down. Everything is drawn on every map already there. The software will say where the bad guys are, and they might be in different places depending on how you ended up in the scenario, depending on your choices. And then when the combat starts, each turn you'll hit a button on the screen, and the system's designed so that everybody's not on their phone. It's designed to feel like a game master at the table. So it's designed to be a big tablet or computer screen at the table, as if there's a GM there showing you the video. So one person will interact with that and say it's the end of turn, and it will tell you what the troll is going to do in that. So and then you'll work it to get the combat instructions. So, but then you roll the dice for the troll. You roll your own dice, and you move the figures around on your map, your physical map.
There is a definite possibility that there are hidden creatures here and there. There's traps on the board, on the map, and depending on what happens in the combat, maybe this creature comes out from like this cave in the side of the wall that nobody looked at.
So how it works mechanically is, so there's a screen there, and you'll hit end of turn, and it'll tell you what's going to happen next turn. But things can happen that are either turn-based. So on turn 3, that monster that's in the cave that Jeremy was talking about will come running out. So, when you hit turn 3, it will tell you. There's also things that might only be triggered based on an activity. So there's a lever on the wall, there's a cage with a lion in it, and so there'll be buttons on the software. If any hero pulls the lever, push this button to see what happens. If any hero moves into this part of the map, the software doesn't know, so you have to say, yeah, I moved over to this part of the map. We even have encounters where it might be there's a unsettling room and it's a little bit dark, but you don't know what's there. What do you want to do? And move your heroes on the map. After you're done moving the heroes on the map, hit this button, and it'll say, if anybody was in these spots, this is what happened. And so that's how we try to have a game master help make the encounters as variable as possible with, traps, actions, timed events, et cetera.
I'm so intrigued by this, and I love the idea of it because I'm an Excel guy, so I love if-then situations, and this sounds like a lot of if-then, 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 and that's really cool to me.
Yeah, we have a really complex rules engine, since you guys are both a little bit technical, that allows the author to come up with, if they've got the magic harp and they convince the so-and-so to get the key and they get the so-and-so, then they might be able to sneak by this or whatever. And we can program that option in the software, but through a series of choices that might be the right choices, they might avoid combat, or combat might be a lot easier or different, or they could go down small story arcs that might be skipped. So the story will change and adjust based on their choices. And some of it will have to do to, if diplomacy is your method to get by something, like I said, your argument and your choices might influence it. And then it'll come down partly to a skill roll, like it does in D&D, that you might have bonuses or minuses depending on, what your actions were.
I've had people asking me before, so is it a true game master experience? Can I go dig a hole somewhere? Well, probably not, right? If it's not adjacent to the story, you're likely not going to be able to do that. Another question was, well, could my character become a hermit and live in the mountains? We're working on the story right now, but that's likely not necessarily an option, right? But within the scope of what we have, there's lots of interwoven storylines, like what Steve was talking about. There's people at the very beginning of the game where your interactions with NPCs will dictate the end game, or at least how you approach the end game. And so I just think that's really cool and exciting.
Some people say, is it really role playing or is it more tabletop? And I think it is some of both, but there's role playing. You're not likely to talk to the computer in a British accent like you might your DM, like some people do when they're playing D&D. But we have scenarios where you'll say, well, I built my character to be sneaky. So what I would do is I want to sneak around the back and see if I can spy on the bad guys. You guys stay here because that's my role. And I'm going to do that. And that's role playing. And you'll try to put yourself in the shoes of your character and make choices and have discussions and arguments with your teammates about what should be done based on that.
That's another big part. It's very team focused. First time I played Pericle, I was expecting Dungeons and Dragons, and it's obviously not D&D, right? It's its own game. But that's just kind of what I was basing things off of. And combat, especially the movement phase of combat is, I'd say, significantly different than D&D. That part of the combat round almost plays more like chess in my mind. The movements are possibly more tactical, or at least it's a lot more team based. There's a lot of team discussion in and outside of combat. And I think that's a really cool part of it, and that lends to the RPG-ness as well.
In D&D, when you have a turn, it's your turn, and you move and attack. And because of that, a lot of people are spending all this time planning out their attack and not really involved in everybody else's play. I mean, they know what's going on, but they aren't as engaged frequently. In this game, you move together as a team, and everybody moves, and then everybody attacks. And that kind of forces you to say, I'm planning on going here because I want to cast a spell. Where are you going? Well, I want to go here. Oh, in that case, I better go here. And so it forces team planning and discussion, and that's what Jeremy is talking about. And that's kind of fun.
Are there individual things that people can do outside of combat? And in the story, are there multiple choices that people individually can have, or is it all team-based?
Yeah, for sure. I'm probably going to be authoring a good amount of the story. And one of my personal favorite things in any game is splitting up the party, or having to, make individual decisions within the larger team dynamic. I think that's really fun. And again, that also leads for more role play moments, I feel. And so, I think Steve had a situation he described earlier in combat where maybe there's a more rogue archetype, right? Sort of character, a sneaky person. Well, there's tons of stuff like that outside of combat. For our kind of dev-only playtest that we were writing, there's a moment where you needed to go investigate a part on the docks because there's lots of mystery in Pericle, Gathering Darkness, trying to figure out like where all these different factions are, who's a part of them, what their motives are, things like that. And so you're investigating like the docks at night. It's kind of shut down. There's armed guards everywhere. The question is, how do you get to where you need to go, right? And so one of the things that I wrote was you can, through these different means, like essentially sneak through. Well, if you've got somebody who is clumsy, that person is not going to be good at that. And so, like you'd have to make a choice. The choice could very well be, let's break down the gate because Steve is in armor and he's got 0 dex and he can't do this. But it could also be, hey, like I'm an archer. I've got lots of dexterity because I want to hit my shots often. Maybe I can sneak in, or maybe I've specifically trained and gain disciplines to like pick locks or sneak past people easily, or maybe I'm very I've got like a silver tongue, right? And I can talk my way out of situations. And so there's options for that. And I think the cool thing is that depending on the party makeup, right, and the players there, it could be a team thing, or it could be an individual or like a duo mission sort of thing. So there's some cool variety with that.
Since we're kind of on the role playing and how does this work thing, I thought I'd talk about a mechanic that's kind of new to games, and that is on the character sheet you can choose what we're calling an ardence, and basically it's the reason for existence for your character. You choose one, and the choices are like, I'm a charitable person by nature, and I feel better about myself if I'm helping the world. I'm focused on economy, that's another one. So money is my focus. Another one is scholar, so knowledge is your focus. Another one is law and order, and another one is holy. Now, we originally had some additional ones, but there's only so much story we can write. So those are the ones we have right now. And each character chooses one, and you get rewarded if you role play in alignment with your options. So, for example, if you chose economy, and you'd be rewarded for haggling with a merchant and getting a better price, then you get ardence points, and getting enough ardence points gives you eventual rewards, the most important one being a mechanic we call karma, which is similar to a hero point, or where you get an option to reroll a die. So that's one more way we help people try to role play. And a fun mechanic in there is the story could be that one person is going to get a reward by role playing in a certain direction and another one in a different direction. And so that puts the party at a discussion point, which is fun.
With that said, so what are some examples of some kinds of stories that players might be able to expect from Pericle Gathering Darkness?
There is an overarching storyline, right? Like we expect players will start here. We expect them to end here, right? That's fairly rigid for the most part, but around that, there's lots of different avenues.
Pericle is the game system. So we have this gaming system, Pericle, and this first release will include the gaming system with the books and the knowledge. And then we will have campaigns, modules that are released. The first one is Gathering Darkness. So that's a story where we will have more that are going to come out. We also have plans to have software to allow people to publish their own on our system. So we aren't ready for that yet. That takes more development, but that might come next year. The world of Pericle is a very big world with lots of different cultures, and we have stories mapped out for several years in the future. There's a big plot that pulls it all together. But this first one takes place in a environment that's probably most similar to the Mediterranean Sea and antiquity. So there's elements that are kind of like ancient Rome and elements that are like ancient Greece. And in fact, the groups that are in this part of the world of Pericle in the Jaren Islands have the same common culture, but they fight each other. Similar to ancient Greece, they're at odds. And so one of the factions are the political groups, and there's several different ones that are potentially conflicting, and you can as Jeremy had mentioned, you can rise to have influence with some of these groups so that you can merge them or fight them. So that's one of the factions in this particular story. There is a cult in this particular story that we won't talk about too much. There is a merchant group that's in this particular story. There's monster factions in this story, and you can join them. And do you get rewards? Well, it changes your story, and it may make some things easier or harder depending on the choices you make.
So are you going to be inclined to join a faction, period, or is your group able to stay freelance and kind of play all sides, or is it are you directed to join a faction at a certain point?
You could play completely neutral and try to just keep all the other machinations at bay, right? Like that's totally a valid strategy. That would probably be the quickest way to play the campaign, likely, right? You would probably miss out on a little bit of like some maybe side adventures or at least side storylines, but you could totally do that. Like in Skyrim, right? You don't have to necessarily follow down the Stormcloaks storyline. It's fun. You should, but you don't have to, right? You can kind of be a free agent.
And that's great too, because it adds a lot of replayability to these modules. Even if someone's played through it with their group, they could easily go back in and maybe choose a different faction or choose to freelance this time around and just see what the difference is.
100%. Yeah. Yep. You could end up allying, with people that you ended up fighting against and killing in the first playthrough, so that would be, that'd be a very different feel.
So I believe you've said before that there is no like character class system with Pericle. Can you give me just talk a little bit about some of the advantages of not having that class system and what kind of things that opens up for the players of the game?
Well, first of all, I think it's inherently a little bit simpler. Our characters have 3 main attributes, not 6, like you see in a lot of other things. So they have might, dexterity, and knowledge. Those 3, and you can build, mix and match your increment of those in any way you want, and it's not bound by any sort of class. You would just do that based on how you want to try to build your character. You get experience points, and you spend your experience points on any way that you want, completely flexibly. You can increase your attributes, and I can make my knowledge or my dexterity or my might higher, or I can choose to spend it on disciplines, which allow me to learn new things, like to be a better swordsman or an archer, or have different maneuver capabilities, or they might be out of combat things that help you with diplomacy or whatever. Or I can spend them on spells. There's no restrictions whatsoever on my spells, my disciplines, or my bump to my attributes, except that you have to have the minimum prerequisites. So, for example, your knowledge has to be at a certain level before you can have certain spells, or before you can learn certain disciplines. So you might be spending energy, working on your knowledge. So an advantage is it's simple, and another advantage is there's an infinite number of possibilities of character creation, even though it's basically simple with just 3 attributes and 2 other things that you're getting. By the way, you can also spend your experience points on skills, so you can be better at diplomacy or stealth. But we have found that it's balanced too. You'd think, wow, that can't be balanced. That's got to be crazy broken. We try to spend a lot of time and energy breaking it, but it's pretty balanced. So.
And talking about, beginning players versus experienced players and like just the mastery of this game, right? Like getting it down. One of the things that I think is really cool, that you don't really see in tabletops really, but you sometimes see in video games, is our first chapter is really kind of a tutorial thing. It really, strengthens the base mechanics of the game. We have NPCs who kind of coach characters through it, but it makes sense because it's all goes with storyline, and so and then you're kind of set free to do whatever you want. At that point, hopefully players feel confident enough to not have to use glance back at the rule books, but we do have cheat sheets that we can set out, that we have to set out on the table. things like that. So that's also a really cool thing that I wanted to mention.
Hopefully we're doing this right. But if you think, when you teach someone to play D&D, people don't just learn it on their own. They're taught by someone else. And so people that are at the table know how to play. The game master knows how to play. And so a new person coming on is taught. Well, that's not true of this game. So there isn't a game master to teach people how to play. So how do we teach a reasonably complicated game to people that are all new? That's sort of our challenge. So we're doing what Jeremy said. So for example, we recommend that people start with pre-gens. They come to the game before they make their own character. And each pre-gen has a whole bunch of versions of them. The top one you tear off, and then there's the one underneath it. And the very first version of the pre-gen is very simple. They don't have as many disciplines as they really should have. They don't have as many spells. So that their mechanics at first are very simple, and their choices are simple, so they can't get confused because they're. And then when they're done, they go to the second version. Aha! They just learned something very quickly, and we step them up. It's kind of like computer games. That's why Jeremy mentioned tutorial. Sort of walk you through a tutorial where they add something, and we're doing the same way because we don't have a game master that's really there to, when they're confused, guide them, and they work their way up after they're out of it. Then they're making their own characters, and they're in the full rule set.
On a scale of 1 to very, very complicated, what's the complication of Pericle?
Maybe slightly more on the complicated side. Maybe a little bit further than that, maybe 3/4. But I think the approachable thing, and maybe it's like the old educator in me, right? The approachable thing for it is that first chapter in the story. Like, you learn slowly how to play the game. And so, like, if the four of us were to sit down right now, Steve would know the most, I would know the second most, and y'all would be swamped if we jumped in anywhere except for that first chapter, right? And that just wouldn't be fun. It would take forever. There'd be lots of repetition. We all know how that goes. But the idea for this is you start the game together with our current experience levels, and at the very end, we might not have the same knowledge level, but we will all have a base knowledge level that hits all of the criteria for standard gameplay. So, I mean, is it hard to learn how to play the cello in 1 year? Yeah. Is it complicated? Yeah. But you can learn how to play the cello in 1 year pretty easily, if you have the instructions that help you do that. So that's kind of how I see it.
So with any of the gamer test sessions that you have played or seen so far, what have been some standout moments or even standout player characters or something that have stuck out to you?
I was trying to build a weird character that he was a glass cannon, and he used magic to go as fast as he could. And my concept was I was going to be so fast I'd be able to run around all the bad guys and get in the back on the first turn. I built my guy so that he would always get to attack first in a turn. And then I gave him the biggest possible weapon he could have. My idea was I'd go around and kill the wizard or the archer or whatever right away. And I was pretty fragile, and I was separated from the other party. So I think I went through several versions of this character before I got one that worked. But finally I got one. His name was Hap Jackson to work. And we came to a room with a dragon. And I thought, well, my guy's designed to do this, so I'm going to YOLO and I'm going to do it. And I ran really fast up to the dragon, separated from my party. It's probably dumb, but I did it anyway. And I got to attack first because that's how I built my character. And I rolled a crit. And in this game, when you roll a crit, you roll a second dice, and there's a chance to get a triple crit. So, and I rolled a triple crit. And then my particular weapon did 3 dice, 6 damage, and I rolled 3 6s. So it's like, what's the chance of that? So I did 3 6s times 3, and it was actually enough to kill the dragon. And so I one-shot at a dragon on turn 1. So from there on after, everybody called my guy Hack Jackson Dragon Slayer, and it was kind of cool. It was
that's amazing.
That's amazing.
And so in this game, you don't end up with hundreds and hundreds of hit points. So
yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so a beginning character might start with, 12 hit points, and at max, at the end, he's got 18 hit points. So it's kind of like real life that your characters are never they're, you don't have somebody that has 200 hit points when a beginner has 10, like in D&D. They're all the same in terms of their might, dexterity, and they go up a little bit, but only like 50% for the world's greatest human compared to somebody that's average. Which also means you use skill and maneuvering to survive, and the monsters are not too dissimilar.
I tried to recreate my first D&D character. That I played when I was like 10 or whatever. So there was one of the scenes, where you have to pull up to this shoreline in a boat, and we did terrible, and we kind of crashed into the rocks a little bit. And so getting out of the boat, we had to like jump on these kind of sea stacks that were sitting out of the, like, kind of coming out of the ocean. And so that was really perilous. And while that was happening, we disturbed this creature that was kind of lurking in the depths. And so there were like multiple things happening. And I think towards the end of combat, what happened is our tank, like our heavy kind of, fighter archetype person, really invested into his might for hit points and for damage. He had tentacles around him, and he was like being pulled into the water, and he would like kind of creep back up and then get pulled into the water more. And then our wizard, an interesting mechanic in Pericle is whenever you cast magic, it actually sucks hit points from you. It takes exhaustion. And so we've got this really cool, it's an add-on for our Kickstarter, actually. And there's these little health trackers. So it's got these two cool designs, and one of them is a hit point pool. One of them is an exhaustion pool. So Sergio, forgive me, I forget how many hit points your wizard had, your guy had, but let's say he had 10, and then he casts a spell that he's essentially concentrating on. Well, that saps a little bit of hit points each round, depending on spells. And so he was really, really low because he had been casting a lot of spells. We hadn't defeated this sea creature yet. The wizard buffed my archer because, like, I had a pretty decent dexterity, but we weren't very, very experienced. And so I was missing every, like, fourth shot maybe, right? And I had, like, a double shot feat. So I was just letting arrows fly. And they were mostly hitting, but in this situation, every single one had a hit. And so, yeah, Sergio had, like, 2 hit points left or something like that, and he cast a spell which took 1, and then he like concentrated or something like that. So Sergio, our caster, passed out, and then it was me up with my bow, and then Steve, your character, was kind of like this dual wielded axe kind of guy, and I think you got taken out because you were in there trying to chop it up at the beginning. So it was me.
It was down to you.
And it was really cool, just the synergy of all of it. If it was anybody else besides Steve's character, they would have been straight up dead at the very beginning, going in and trying to chop it up. If it was anybody except Chang's character, like the heavy armored strong guy, would have been pulled into the water, dead or eaten or something worse, and if it was anybody else playing that wizard character than Sergio, they might have made other decisions, but he buffed me and it all worked out. And it was a really cool, oh my God, we actually did it sort of moment. I mean, ever since, like, from I guess round 1 really of crashing into the side of the cliff, I was like, no, we're doomed. But we pulled it off. That was really cool.
That happens a little more in this game, that people end up unconscious, and it comes down to half the team's unconscious. It's not rare, and probably they die a little more in this than in D&D and Pathfinder too.
It's deadly, but in a fun way. Yeah.
You did a Kickstarter in the past, is that correct?
Yeah.
When does your new Kickstarter begin?
Yeah, we failed the Kickstarter a year ago. Again, our original idea was, hey, let's just publish this for fun. We'll post a few things on Facebook. We'll go live and see if enough people back it. And we didn't really know what we were doing. And surprisingly, we actually raised a decent amount of money considering we didn't give it a really good try. But then we thought we got enough interest that we thought people really do want this game. We spent this last year learning how to Kickstart. It's all about building a sense of community and awareness of the game and getting enough people that we know want to back the game. So we're going to have tens of thousands of people that we are communicating with that are interested in the game by go live. So we'll be successful this time around. To answer your question, it's coming right up in February 15th specifically is our Kickstarter date.
And what kind of goals are you hoping to achieve with that this time?
We are setting our Kickstarter goal at $60,000, which is a minimum to publish the game. In truth, this is an inexpensive game to make because it's really kind of building three things. It's building a game, that has a lot of material components that are expensive, but then we also have to build software, and software is not cheap to build. And the story is very elaborate, so it's kind of like you have to buy campaigns plus software plus story. We really need more money than $60,000 actually to get it developed, but I think we think we'll get it. But so we, minis would make the game a little too expensive. So I don't know if you can see that, but we have instead we have very cool standees, and this gives us the option of having lots and lots of choices. At least through add-ons, so that you can find your guy that has your axe and your shield like you want. But anyway, I got sidetracked a little bit. We need more than 60 within our minimum, to be honest.
What are some of do you guys have different perks or anything like that some of the donors can look forward to?
Kickstarter specific items, our core game is not going to include them, but our small step up, we're looking just over $100. And this is going to include a special Kickstarter only lineage, which is going to be, in addition to our humans, our forest elves, our stone dwarves, our everkin, which are kind of like a halfling gnomish sort of peoples, and our odrim, which are kind of a magic, I don't know, they have like this affinity with magic. In addition to those standard base types of characters you can play, we're also going to have we've been talking with our backers, and there's interest for somebody who kind of has maybe shape-shifting abilities. Now, there are lots of spells that have shape-shifting abilities, so we need to hammer this out and we need to play test it, but there's going to be a special race, ancestry lineage. And then in addition to that, we have a magic item compendium, and it's got a runic system written around, and there's going to be spells relating to some magic items. One of the cool things we would like to introduce, without going on a big tangent, because we could, but I will try not to. I think it'd be really cool if we can pull magic from some item and put it into another item. So perhaps Steve's kind of barbarian-esque character who dual wields axes finds an amazing two-handed sword, or a bow, or a spear, or a staff, or a wand, but it's got something that he wants. Grab this spell, invest in this spell, and then I could like siphon stuff. So there's also lots of magical items, just kind of bonus items that you can get. So it's kind of like a menagerie of magical artifacts and skills, magic stuff related to it. I think that's really, really cool.
The other thing that we're doing special for the Kickstarter, Chris, is, sorry I interrupted you, Jeremy, but is we're trying to get some people to sign up ahead of time and put down some money. So either $1 at first, and as we're getting closer, now we're asking for $5 to prepay. And the reason we're doing that, those people become VIPs. They get to interact with Jeremy and what Jeremy was mentioning and the whole team. But as we're planning things out, like you guys get to help us come up with this special race or lineage. But the other thing, the reason we do that is to be honest, we back up a minute. What those people get is a better price on the Kickstarter. So you ask Kickstarter exclusive, people that have paid a little money ahead of time will get the best price that we will offer at the point of Kickstarter. One of the reasons, to be honest, why we do this is we want to really count the number of people that we have confidence will back the game, so that we know when we launch we'll be successful. So that's part of why we're doing it.
Yeah, and we're going to be doing lots of playtesting. I know, like lots of our backers on Discord recently have been talking like, "Oh, I want to playtest." We're going to utilize people who want to playtest so that we can make sure that we are setting up that first chapter correctly in terms of like education of the game.
Where could potential players or people that are interested in Pericle Gathering Darkness go to find more information or to try to get in touch with somebody to learn more about the game?
periclethegame.com. That'll take you right to our website. From there, you can sign up for the email. And if you want to, you can also pledge some money to become a VIP. But you can read about the game, you can get on our email list, and you can join the VIP. It also has links there to our Kickstarter page. Right now, it's not live yet, so you won't see much, but later you'll be able to go to our Kickstarter page. And we have a Facebook page, both a regular Facebook page and the VIP Facebook page, which you can belong to.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us and for giving us your time and talking to us about the game. I think I can tell from Joseph's face, you've definitely hooked us on Pericle Gathering Darkness. We're definitely going to be looking forward to the Kickstarter and getting word out there for you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We really appreciate the opportunity to be on NerdSloth.